It is often said that the night of the new moon is the most terrifying of all. Such nights are said to harbor malevolent entities, spirits, vampires, and ghosts. These apparitions, whatever they may be, gain immense power, but in my understanding, not all souls are alike. Not every soul seeks recognition, and among the evil ones, there are two distinct kinds. These souls are peculiar, creating illusions, playing tricks on the mind, much like a cat toying with a mouse. They torment humans similarly, and if you are weak, you might succumb to their game. But if you are wise or simply fortunate, you might escape unharmed. Perhaps that night, I was fortunate. I was studying at a boarding school in 1993, and we were on a break due to some festival. That afternoon, I left school and embarked on my journey home. I didn't carry much, just a single set of clothes. After a 3-hour bus ride, I disembarked at the stop nearest to my village. The sun had begun to set as I alighted, and time seemed to slip away quickly. Without hesitation, I started walking towards my village, about 2 miles away. Strangely, I could hardly see the sky, darkness enveloped me. The path was barely visible, and I fumbled through the night, guided only by the faint light from distant houses. After walking for about 20 to 25 minutes, I suddenly noticed someone ahead on the road. They were far away, but I kept my eyes on them as I moved closer. Eventually, I saw that they were 2 girls, around my age. I was singing softly and tried to pass by them without making a sound. It struck me as odd. What were 2 girls doing in the middle of the road at such a late hour, in complete darkness? Still, I stopped, thinking they might be lost or in distress. I approached them and asked who they were and where they were from. They repeated the same words, and I insisted that I was heading home, just a short distance away. It became clear that they were identical twins. I examined them closely and asked again if they were lost. This time, something felt even more unsettling. There was a strong smell of burning flesh in the air. I began to walk faster, ignoring their strange words. A bit further down the road, I felt compelled to look back, though fear gripped me. Their odd behavior had unnerved me, but I slowly turned around, only to find that they had vanished. My heart raced, and I quickened my pace. Just then, I saw 3 women walking ahead of me, all dressed in white saris with their heads covered. My pace slowed, though I kept glancing back out of fear. The night was pitch dark, but I could still see them clearly, which was baffling. Finally, I couldn't resist. I was terrified, sandwiched between those 2 girls and these 3 women. I feared something ominous was about to happen. I hurriedly passed by them, veering off the path slightly. As I moved ahead, I heard one of the women whispering and then laughter. I thought they were not from my village, so I turned to look back. What I saw made my blood run cold. The 3 women had identical faces, with wide, eerie smiles that stretched to their eyes. Their eyes were a ghastly white, and they grinned at me with a sinister expression. My body froze, goosebumps erupted all over. Terrified by their horrifying faces, I started running as fast as I could. I had no sense of direction, just an overwhelming urge to flee. I ran towards the distant light, out of breath, until I collided with something and fell hard, injuring my thumb. My slipper broke, and I was in excruciating pain. Still, I felt that I had left those women far behind. To reassure myself, I looked back, but there was no one in sight. I pressed on, limping towards the light. But as I looked ahead, I saw those 3 women again, floating towards me in their white clothes, their eyes gleaming, their smiles wide and terrifying. I scrambled to my feet and ran faster than before. The path blurred as I dashed towards the light, hoping for safety. Eventually, I saw someone in the distance and thought they might help me. But as I drew closer, a sense of dread washed over me. I knew that something dangerous lay ahead. Exhausted, I could barely speak. Tears streamed down my face, and my body trembled with fear. The two figures in front beckoned me with their hands, urging me to follow. I didn't know who they were, but I felt compelled to trust them. I ran after them, though they moved with unnatural speed, as if floating in the air. Suddenly, they vanished. I stopped, terrified, realizing I was near my village. I sprinted the remaining distance to my home, but whatever had been following me seemed to have pursued me all the way. When I reached my house, I saw 3 white cats sitting at the door of the house opposite mine. As soon as they saw me, they bolted with an eerie cry, like someone mourning. I was petrified, too frightened to call out for help. But once again, fortune favored me. At that moment, my father came out of the house with a stick. He noticed me standing there, dazed and trembling. He asked what had happened, but before I could answer, I collapsed, shaking uncontrollably as if having a seizure, and lost consciousness. It took me 3 days to regain full consciousness, and during that time, I learned that every time I awoke, I would experience another seizure and lose consciousness again. My father suspected that I had encountered something evil that night, a moonless night. When I recovered, I told him about the 2 ghostly girls, but neither of us ever discovered their true nature or why they had saved my life. Have you ever experienced something strange like this on a moonless night? The second account was recounted to me by a close friend while he was on duty in the area. Now, I shall narrate this tale to you, as told by my friend. Greetings, my name is Avinash. There is no doubt that this incident took place during a time when fear gripped the entire nation, indeed the entire world. This is the same event that unfolded in the valley, a true occurrence. Amidst global unrest, this incident transpired in Konkan. However, I am unable to disclose the exact location due to my position in the police force, as it would likely contravene regulations. Thus, I will only relay the events as they occurred. My duty that night was at the police station, where I remained with my colleague, Rajeshwar. We ventured to accommodate guests in the nearby area. There was also a shoreline near our police station, an area reminiscent of India with a few trees along the shore, not densely wooded, but with some greenery. A short distance away, there was a small settlement. We would routinely patrol the area to check if anyone was loitering along the beach. As usual, we reached the shore and parked the car on the road. We walked ahead through the shoreline. Everything was tranquil, and both of us stood at the far end of the shore, gazing at the sea, enjoying the serene ambience and the cool breeze. Suddenly, Rajeshwar halted, something catching his eye. I took the binoculars from his hand and looked ahead. There was something, round, resembling a large stone, metallic like a giant potato, or perhaps a sizable sea creature. I suggested to Rajeshwar that we venture closer for a better look. I quickly switched on the flashlight and we moved toward the water. There, lying just outside the water, was a large, heavy sack, enormous, like a large bundle. Rajeshwar regarded it with a sense of foreboding and questioned what it could be. We both suspected that it might contain a dead body. I pressed the sack with a stick and remarked that I couldn't be certain, but it felt like something solid. Rajeshwar also pressed the sack with his stick, checking if it might indeed be a corpse. Understanding the gravity of the situation, I pressed the sack again in several places. After repeated attempts, it became apparent that the sack was indeed full, leading us to believe there was a body inside. Rajeshwar, mustering his courage, dragged the sack from the water. He attempted to see what was inside by carefully cutting it open with a cutter I handed him. As he did so, the sack suddenly burst open, revealing half of a body inside. We both recoiled in shock as a strong, rancid odor assaulted our senses. The corpse's hands were positioned over its chest, its eyes were covered, and its face and nose were intact, though the lower half of the body remained inside the sack. Rajeshwar lightly touched the corpse's hands and listened for any signs of life, but there was nothing, no sound, no movement. After a brief examination, Rajeshwar concluded that the person had been dead for some time. I agreed, saying we should report it to control. Rajeshwar, his face illuminated by the flashlight, urged me to stay calm as he dragged the sack further from the water. We both pulled the sack away from the waves, but in our fear, we moved with great caution. I handed Rajeshvar the cutter, and he began to cut open the sack further. The moment it opened, half of the body was exposed, and we both jumped back in terror. The stench was overpowering. The corpse's hands were still crossed over its chest, its eyes bandaged, and the face and nose straight, while the rest of the body remained inside the sack. Rajeshvar gently touched the corpse's hands and tried to listen for any sound, but there was nothing, no movement at all. After a thorough investigation, Rajeshvar confirmed that the person had been dead for quite some time. I looked at the corpse in the light of the torch and suggested that we leave it as it was. We contacted the control room via wireless phone, as our mobiles had no range in that area. After gaining some range, I called the police station in Thane. We learned that most of the officers from the station were out on patrol in the surrounding areas, leaving only one constable at the station. Because most of the force was on emergency duty, we didn't expect anyone to arrive soon. We both sat down, wondering what to do next. We took out our phones and began taking pictures of the body and its surroundings for about half an hour. Soon after, we received word from the police station that an ambulance and additional personnel would arrive to investigate the crime scene within 2 hours. Feeling somewhat relieved, we kept watch over the area. It was around midnight, meaning we would have to stay until morning, perhaps 5 a.m., since when someone says 2 hours, it often means 5. We simply had to wait. As the hours passed, both of us grew increasingly tired. Rajeshvar, repeatedly rubbing his eyes, admitted that he was feeling sleepy. I suggested that he rest a short distance away, and I would wake him later. He took out his paper, spread it out, and lay down a little distance from me. Now alone, I kept watch over the area and the corpse, with only the sound of crickets breaking the silence. Although it wasn't a forested area, the desolation of the place would unsettle anyone. As I sat there, my eyes adjusted to the darkness, and the surrounding shadows became less intimidating. Yet, the darkness remained impenetrable, and I could barely make out the shapes of the trees. I kept the flashlight on, though its light had dimmed. After half an hour of sitting there, my eyes began to droop. I noticed something glinting in the sea's waters far away. I strained to see what it was, sitting in the darkness, when suddenly I saw some movement in the corpse. Startled, I sat up and directed the flashlight towards it. The last part of the sack was moving. Seeing this, my heart raced. I realized something was terribly wrong, and before I could react, the corpse emerged from the sack and stood upright, swaying like the waves. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized the body was alive. In a panic, I called out to Rajeshvar, who woke up and, seeing the situation, rushed over. He asked why I was shouting, and I pointed towards the dead body, now moving towards the sea. At first, he was incredulous, but then he saw it too. The corpse was walking into the water, disappearing beneath the waves. Rajeshvar ran after it, trying to stop it, but our shouts had no effect. By the time we reached the water's edge, the corpse had disappeared completely into the sea, leaving us both standing there in shock. Just moments later, 2 vehicles approached us from behind. One was an ambulance, the other a police car. The officers arrived, and Rajeshvar and I told them everything we had seen, but they laughed it off as a joke. We insisted that the corpse had disappeared, but they were skeptical. Then we remembered that we had taken pictures of the body, but when we checked our phones, the most shocking thing was that there was not a single photo of the corpse. We were stunned as we looked through all the images, finding nothing. The officers didn't conduct a full investigation because there was nothing left to investigate, no evidence, no witnesses, nothing to prove that we had seen a living corpse vanish before our eyes in the water. And so, friends, today's episode ends here. How did you find these stories? Please let me know in the comments. Let's meet again in the next episode with a new story. Thank you.